She was sold for less than a horse. By sunrise, the whole town knew her price, but they didn't know what she'd become. What happened on that mountain trail didn't just save one girl's life, it exposed a secret the entire valley had been hiding for decades. And the man who bought her, he wasn't what anyone expected. If you love stories that rewrite what you think you know, subscribe. It helps us make more pieces like this that you won't stop talking about. Comment your theory below. The best answer gets pinned. And they sold her at dawn, wrapped in the same blanket she'd learned to hide inside. The man who bought her didn't come because he wanted her. He came because he had nowhere left to bury a ghost. What happened on that trail up into the pines would make the whole valley sleep strange that winter. But the question that nobody asked was this: who was the one truly lost? The girl with a bruise across her cheek, or the man who had already lost his name? This is a story about choices people make when they are afraid of the wrong thing. It is about barter, not just for flour or horses, but for dignity, for silence, for the right to be forgotten. It is about the small mercies that look like nothing when they arrive, and how those soft things can become the fiercest kind of armor. We begin in the dust of a small plateau town called Bramble's Crossing, where gossip grows like weeds and the world is measured in who shows up for the town bake sale. In the very first light of market day, a wagon creaks forward with a girl wrapped in a threadbare shawl. She is 16. Her name is Mara Lynn, and the town will later tell versions of that morning in a dozen different voices, each one telling a slightly easier truth than the one before. But right now, at dawn, there are three things in the air: the smell of coffee, the hum of gossip, and the quiet determination in a stranger's eyes. That stranger, he is called Ephraim Hale, a man who carries a toolbox and a secret that has made him move like smoke through the years. He keeps his distance because he thinks being noticed is a danger to everyone he knows. He is called a hermit. He is not a monster. He is a refuge. The market square quiets when the trader cries his goods: bread, tools, a broken fiddle. People whisper. The girl's father, Jory Lynn, stands tall beneath a hat that's seen better sunrises. He is angry, and anger is always prettier when worn by someone else's misfortune. He tells the crowd stories about the girl, how she is lazy, how she eats too much, how she is bad for business. The crowd nods because they want simple reasons for complicated hurt. Ephraim steps forward. He is a man from the ridge who rarely speaks in town and even rarely gives coin. He says simply, "I'll take her for a season. I have land high up and a place by the stream. I'll give you a set of harnesses and a sack of meal." There's an audible intake of breath. A trade is made. A father exhales and shifts the burden. The girl, Mara, does not shout. She does not plead. She folds her hands and looks like a child who has been taught that silence keeps the peace, even if the peace is a quiet kind of death. Ephraim's wagon rides slow at first, then faster up a path the valley rarely remembers. He hands her a loaf of coarse bread, a blanket, and an apology that sounds like practical directions. "You'll help with the stove, the animals, maybe the garden," he says. "You'll learn things here you won't learn in a parlor." Mara looks at him as if measuring whether one more person can be trusted. She climbs into the wagon. The bellows of town diminish until all that's left is the clack of horses on mountain gravel. For the townsfolk left behind, reality bends to fit their stories. She was sold. She was punished. She deserved it. For the pair on the wagon, a new story is about to begin that will not fit any of their expectations. The cabin sits like an old bruise in a meadow of pine. It has a crooked chimney and a porch that lists politely to the north. Ephraim's hands, at once deliberate and worn, show Mara where the broom hides and how the kettle sings when the water is ready. He does not call her daughter. He does not call her many things people in towns like to call each other. He calls her helper. A pattern emerges. Mornings start with milking, then turning the earth, then slow afternoons where Mara learns to listen to things that have voices other than human. The creek that tells of rain, the hawk that watches like a sentinel, the rustle of roots holding soil in place. She learns to make bread in a way that suits her hands. She learns to whittle. Slowly, the world gives back. Ephraim is reserved. He has a locked trump in the loft that Mara glimpses once, ornate, old, and heavy with the sort of past that refuses to fade. He says, "Some things are best left," if she asks. He carries a Bible with certain pages worn thin and reads at dusk, not out of insistence, but because the words help him keep a rhythm steady as a heart. And Mara, who got her sense of herself from other people's mouths, begins to find small private identities, the girl who sorts seeds, the giver of eggs to a hungry neighbor, the one who draws the first true map of the meadow. She keeps a tiny notebook and sketches birds until the hawk on the hillside becomes less of a symbol and more of an honest creature she can name. One afternoon, Mara finds an injured hawk tangled in twine near the barn. Its wing is twisted, eyes fierce and full of accusation. This moment is small and everything. She wraps it, learns its breathing, and watches Ephraim work like a surgeon of wood, precise, calm. When the hawk begins to heal, it pecks at the air with a growing impatience that seems to say, "I am not tamed." We are both learning something about freedom. Ephraim says, almost to himself, "Not everything we take in needs to stay. Sometimes shelter is a pause, not a cage." The hawk becomes a kind of myth they pass to each other in the evenings, a symbol of the things they've rescued and the things they've lost. Mara names it Alder, and in teaching Alder to test the wind, she is teaching herself that there are wounds that seal and wings that remember how to lift. This is the first lesson in the cabin's quiet schooling. Healing is never only physical. It is the small recognitions that stitch a person back to themselves. The valley remembers everything. Word moves faster on well-trodden paths than the season. A midwife named Hannah Rowe rides up one week with jars of dried herbs and a loaf of rye. She knows Ephraim, having traded nails for a calf once. She knows Mara, too, by the look of a girl learning to speak when she's finally allowed. Hannah is the story's small conscience. She grins with missing teeth and wraps a shawl around Mara's shoulders like a benediction. "You keep at that pen," she teases. "The world needs words." But while Hannah sees good, the valley has other eyes. Jorylen, Mara's father, starts to make noise in the market. He finds a lawyer in a nearby town and whispers to the sheriff that something improper has happened. Small grievances are easy to grow when you water them with shame. At town, rumor twists the story. She was sold because she was unclean, they say. She was taken to be hidden, they murmur. Ephraim paid coin for a wife, they assume. Each retelling strengthens the lie until it feels like a truth the town can use to sleep at night. This is how communities protect patterns. They repeat them. One night, around the fire, an elder from a nearby village visits Ephraim and Mara. His voice is gravel and honey. He shares an old naming story about a little ember that waits, a phrase that lands in Mara like a small coin into a palm. He gives her another name in his tongue, Little Light. Not a grand name, but one that acknowledges heat and the possibility for warmth. Names in this story are currency. Mara has been called worthless, lazy, too much, by a father who feared her softness. The elder's name is a mirror, and she looks in it and sees a person with the right to be whole. This segment is a pivot. Mara's identity shifts. She no longer exists as what others say she is. She now has a thing inside that can be tended. She writes, and the letters become more than marks. They are the small fences she builds to keep herself from being swept away. A single folded telegram nailed to the porch post changes the season like frost. It travels on a chain of inked sentences, a sheriff's formal claim, a father's demand for custody. Return the girl, it says, in neat print. The valley knows law, and law is often the most efficient form of cruelty when it serves the comfortable. Ephraim reads it and folds it open and shut like an old map. Mara reads the paper and feels the valley's eyes closing around her again. But now she has Hannah, the elder, Miss Rowe, children who learned letters on her porch, and a fledgling community that has begun to call her teacher. The telegram is a hand reaching into a nest. Will they hide or will they fight?
If you read legal threats as weather, then this is the part of the season where everyone learns to stack wood. Ephraim sharpens tools. Mara sews a cloak deeper and more discreet than the ones she used to wear. Hannah makes a list of allies. They write letters to the nearest city editor, not to plead, but to tell the truth. Mara was not stolen. She left a place where she was sold like an object and found refuge. There is a scene of quiet discipline. Children learn to recite evidence like prayers. Neighbors practice testimony like tongues. Deliberate, mundane acts build a case more powerful than a single courtroom or a single speech. They build a community witness. In these minutes, the story does not rush. Instead, it shows the accumulation of small, steady efforts that tilt a future. This is crucial. Redemption and justice rarely arrive as fireworks. They come as a slow turning of a screw. The trip down the ridge is a study in contrast. The valley smells of dust and hot iron, the town green of gossip and convenient memory. Mara rides with Ephraim at her side. She has drawn the faces of the children who will testify into the margins of her notebook, names that feel like small armor. On the road, the pair pass markers of memory, the tree with initials carved when Ephraim once wished for a life he thought he would never get, the roadside cross that remembers a boy who died too young. The landscape keeps its own stories. The ride into town is full of tension, measured like the slow approach to a judge's bench. Town Hall is a place of wood and public gaze. The sheriff lays out papers in a manner meant to remind everyone of rules. He speaks with the confidence of someone who has learned that procedure can wear down truth. Here is the documentation, he says. We have legal authority. Mara sits, fingers white around her notebook. She listens to the lawyer speak about custody like livestock. It is a cold kind of language that strips people of their textures. But then, someone stands. Tom, the general storekeeper, who remembers the public sale, remembers the weighing of the girl's life in bags of flour. He tells what he saw. Others rise. This part is dramatic because it is a contest of witnesses. Some voices want to reinforce the old story. Some choose to tell new truths. Here we see how bravery is sometimes the act of speaking plainly in a room full of people who prefer to look away. Witnesses line up like actors on a stage, but their lines are real. Hannah talks about Mara's hands, how they learned the oven, how they taught children letters. A widower speaks up about seeing the father trade the girl, a humiliating spectacle he won't forget. The elder from the village speaks in measured sentences about the land Ephraim occupies and the respect he's earned among the folk who have roots deeper than ink. Each testimony shifts the air like wind pulling at dry grass. It is not an immediate victory. It is a struggle to get a truth to sit in the judge's ears. There are deliberate beats where the court waits for the sound of a final bell. The town squints as if trying to see which story is strongest. Midway through the hearing, an unexpected figure arrives, a woman named Margot Hale, Ephraim's estranged sister, who is the town's newspaper compositor. She has prints and a column written by Mara herself, Stories of the Ridge, sent under a pen name. The editor's letter says, "She told the truth because it needed telling." Margot's presence flips the balance, not because of celebrity, but because words reach beyond town walls. This is a turning point. The judge reads aloud an article where Mara described the public sale in honest, crafted detail. That writing becomes more than guilt. It becomes a weapon of light. There is a moment of stillness where the room acknowledges that sometimes stories rooted in courage are stronger than court filings crafted to obscure. Jory stands and tries to craft a narrative where the sale was a lesson, but his voice cracks. The town sees the difference between performative hardness and a man who has chosen shame as a costume. There is a civic correction, not vengeance, but accountability. The judge considers the evidence and the voices of the community. This segment is intentionally not about punishment. It is about truth taking root. Jory leaves the hall with a smaller hat and a less certain step. The world has the habit of flattening people who insist on cruelty. The penalty is often the loss of the simplest currency, trust. The ruling is not a theatrical parade. It is nuance. Mara is given the right to choose where she will live. She chooses the cabin. She chooses Ephraim. The community recognizes that family can be chosen as well as born, but freedom is not a final sentence. It is a beginning. There is the awkwardness of returning to a place you have remade. Mara goes back to the cabin and kneels where Alder the hawk once slept. She places fresh seeds into the soil and reads the first line of a new story she will publish under her own name. The narrative beats here are soft but essential. A choice repeated every morning, the daily acts that reinforce the decision to live in truth rather than the shelter of falsehood. Homecoming is smaller than fireworks. It is a return of rhythm. The cabin's chores become ritual again. The children come back for lessons. Ephraim is quieter now, in the way of someone who has done a hard thing and found it easier to be gentle. Mara begins to teach, not as a scientist with a plan, but as someone who knows the cost of being unseen. There is also an exploration of how a community rebuilds. Some neighbors apologize in small ways, some keep distance, and some become firm friends. Mara creates a small school on the porch. Both the valley kids and the children of the village come. She teaches letters, but also the small radical idea that seeing someone is a kind of repair. Ephraim, at last, opens the locked trunk. It takes an entire winter of trust for him to do it. Inside are a few simple things: an old soldier's watch, stopped at sundown, a photograph, faded at the edges, and a small stack of letters he never mailed. They are letters to a family he once lost in a war he will not name. They are not confessions of crimes. They are grief, plain and honest. This scene is crucial because it clarifies a past without moralizing. Ephraim's silence was not guilt in the cruelest sense, but a kind of self-punishment. Mara reads the letters and learns the only way to hold someone is to allow their sorrow to be part of them. She folds one letter into her notebook and uses a line as a prompt in the next lesson. What did you save this week? The trunk's revelation humanizes Ephraim. It deepens the idea that all of us carry chests of private grief, and some of us need a patient hand to help unlock them. As seasons turn, the cabin's circle grows. Children who once waved from afar now come with cheeks bright from play. The elder sits on the stump and weaves names for the children. Hannah brings remedies and a weekly story hour. Margot prints Mara's pieces and sends them on. The valley reads words that were once only meant for the ridge. People write back. A gentle economy of kindness begins to replace the valley's earlier habit of spectacle. This is the montage of repair: sewing, teaching, shared bread. Each act is ordinary, but together they are a revolution to make a simple, loving life in a place that once traded people as if they were wares is a quiet but radical act. One spring, Boulder the hawk launches from the porch and disappears into the blue with an emphatic wing beat that sounds like a drum. Mara watches and knows two things at once: that letting go is not losing, and that a life lived with agency produces its own flight. The courtroom ruling fades in memory. The thing that lasted is the daily choice to see and be seen. Ephraim and Mara sit by the stove, and he says, "You wrote it true." She says simply, "We made it true." This is the end of the plot arc, but not the end of the story. Everything continues. There are 3 small lessons in this mountain story for anyone listening. The first one: sanctuary matters. Physical refuge can be where a person learns to reassemble. It may not fix everything, but it buys time for repair for everything in life. If this story changed the way you look at the people around you, the ones the town writes off, shops dismiss, or whispers over in line, then there's a single small thing you can do. Share this story with someone who still believes people can't change. Tell it to someone who needs a reminder that small acts of kindness compound into justice. If the idea of sanctuary moved you, hit subscribe, because stories like this are a map of the quiet things that actually change lives. We tell these stories because when one life is saved, we keep a little of ourselves. Secondly, witnesses win cases. When communities refuse to collude with cruelty, the truth always finds a way to the light. Real justice is rarely immediate. It is cumulative. And lastly, names here worked like medicine. To give someone a true name, a name that recognizes their worth, is an act more powerful than judgment. If you ask what changed the valley, it wasn't the court alone. It was people deciding to see each other more fully and to risk being vulnerable to do it. It was an elder, a midwife, a newspaper printer, and a man who once thought silence would keep him safe. The ripple that began the day Mara was carried away by a wagon ended not in retribution, but in choosing the common humanity that saves people. The question we started with, who was lost and who was found, becomes softer. Both were, until both were not.